Hey guys, it's Ellie from TeensVsCancer here today, and I want to talk to you guys about anxiety. So I had anxiety for a lot of my treatment. I think a lot of cancer patients do have anxiety as well, and I found that it was horrible. I hated anxiety. It was mentally and physically draining and completely overwhelming because I felt trapped. Because I had this voice in my head telling me that I was not going to be okay, and that was just terrifying to me because it completely consumed my life, and it was a very dark place in my life. I'd get frequent panic attacks, I'd think of really negative thoughts, and it was really hard to cope with, but I found some coping mechanisms along the way. Even though there's no simple solution to anxiety, I wish there was a simple solution, but there just isn't. So I just want to give you guys my tips on how to cope with anxiety today, and I hope these tips help you. My first piece of advice is to go to counselling. I know a lot of teenagers will be opposed to counselling because it just seems awkward. But counselling is great. It was for me because I was one of the teenagers who resisted it at first. But then when my anxiety got at its worst, my doctor said, it's probably the best thing for you. So I went, and it really helped me because a lot of my anxiety stemmed from the fact that I had all these negative thoughts going around in my mind, and I didn't want to voice them to my parents because I didn't want to scare them. So just having a complete stranger with no emotional attachment to me was great because I was able to voice to her these anxieties and negative thoughts that I had in my mind, and it felt like a weight was lifted off of my shoulders, and it genuinely helped me sleep better, and it was definitely great for me. And also my counsellor gave me loads of different coping mechanisms for when I got panic attacks or when I was thinking of negative thoughts, so she helped me massively. My second piece of advice is to have a good support network. I think this is one of the most important things to coping with anxiety because a good support network can make all that difference, because when you have anxiety, you're just thinking of loads of negative thoughts and you're really fearful. But if you have a good support network, they're the ones that will instill positivity and confidence inside of you. So they really help to reverse the effects of the negativity that you may be feeling. And they're just great for support. I think the biggest thing for anyone suffering with anxiety is they should know that they have support, and having a support network can help with that, because when you have anxiety, you do feel really lonely and you feel like you're the only one. But if you have a support network around you, a loving support network, then they will really help you get through it. And if you ever have panic attacks or you ever need to talk to anybody, they're always there to help you out. My third piece of advice is to do things that you enjoy, because this will help keep your mind off things. Obviously, a lot of the time you're either neutropenic or you're not feeling great, so you can't go outdoors much. But I found that when I was bored, sat at home, really ill, my anxiety got a lot worse. So whenever I felt good, I always seized the opportunity and I went out with my friends, or I would go to the cafe, stuff like that. Do anything that keeps your mind off of what's happening to you currently. I always have my friends over every Friday, and just those few hours with them, it kept my mind off of the anxiety and the fears that I was feeling inside. So it's always important that you do that, because anything to distract your mind is good. My next piece of advice is to not bottle things up, because when you bottle things up, the anxieties just stack on top of each other, and it feels like a huge burden that you're lifting on your shoulders. So try and talk to one of your friends or a family member. If not, then talk to a therapist, because with anxiety, it's usually an accumulation of fears, and if you don't release them, talk about them to someone, then they can cascade into something a lot bigger and a lot scarier. So you need to make sure that you be open and don't bottle things up. My last piece of advice is to face the fear. So a lot of people's anxieties is based on a fear. Obviously, some of these you can't actually literally face, but for me, my biggest anxiety was that my feeding tube would go into my lung, it would fill my lung with fluid, and then I would dry drown. I know, it's so illogical. It can't even happen. Like, what? But that was my anxiety. It's illogical, but it happens. But what really helped me was actually facing that fear. So of course, whenever I got my feeding tube down, there was a bit of anxiety in me, and then I know there was this one time where they could just not get the feeding tube down because I kept having panic attacks and I kept ripping it out. But then I stopped and I thought, I really need this feeding tube. It's so important to keep me alive. So I stopped that voice in my head telling me that I was not going to be okay, and the feeding tube went down. So that was amazing because I finally got some control over the voice in my head and my anxieties that I was feeling, and I finally had power. I think that was important because I was able to sleep again. I felt so much better. My panic attacks were less frequent, so it was really important getting that control over the fear, because otherwise it would just take over me, and just having that control and authority over it was really empowering. So if you have anxiety based on getting your blood test or going into a scanner, anything like that, then face the fear, be calm, be strong, stop that voice inside of your head that's telling you that it's not going to be okay, and face the fear, because that's the most important thing that you can do. Because if you give the voice and anxiety power, then it will consume you. But if you don't, then if you give yourself the power, then you can move forward. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. For more information and advice, go to the TeensVsCancer website. The link will be below. Remember that you are stronger than cancer.